Hey, welcome back. There's a serious safety issue affecting us in general aviation, and I think we really need to talk about it. It's an easy fix, but it requires you to have a different mindset. And it really does require us to think a little bigger about what's going on all around us and where are we. Now let's say you're on the track to be a professional pilot, or maybe you're just a really serious hobbyist and you decide, I want to get my instrument rating. You're going to go through a fair amount of training for that, and being an instrument rated pilot definitely makes you a safer, more proficient pilot. Believe it or not, flying by instruments is actually easier than flying VFR most of the time because most of the decisions have already been made for you. You just follow the instructions that are on the approach plate or the ATC hands off unless there's some compelling reason you can't, and all is well. A few years ago, I was doing a safety presentation at one of the big Part 141 schools here in Florida. Afterwards, and I was really pleased about this, a number of students hung around and talked to me and asked questions about how they could best achieve their goals in aviation. One young woman in particular really sticks out in my mind. We were talking, maybe half a dozen of us, and she was asking a really pertinent question. She had her CFII ride coming up, her instrument instructor ride, which has a fairly high unsatisfactory rate. It is a challenging ride. You are supposed to be able to fly by instruments and instruct someone how to be able to fly by instruments at the same time. Her question was based on the fact that she'd done most of her training at a towered airport. Now, when I'm shooting an instrument approach at a towered airport, it's fairly simple. I read all the approach plates, I brief myself on it, I talk to air traffic control. Approach control vectors me around, puts me in place for the approach, and then I switch over to tower, and tower will clear me to land, or they won't. And I may either land on the runway they assign me, or go missed approach, or follow their directions, depending on what needs to happen. The decisions are basically made for me. Her challenge was she was going to be taking her CFII ride at my home airport, which is a non-towered airport. At a non-towered airport, there is no air traffic control to clear you to land on the runway. You have to make that decision for yourself based on the conditions. And here was her question. If she's on the approach with the examiner and she gets to the point where she can take off the view limiting device, whether that's a hood or foggles, and she sees traffic in front of her, VFR traffic, what should she do? Well, I'm kind of a hard case, so I didn't answer the question. I asked the question back to her. If you were flying VFR and you're on a straight into the runway and you see traffic in front of you, what are you going to do? And she said, I would avoid the traffic. Yeah, that's what you do when you're on an instrument approach as well. If there's traffic in front of you and you see it, you avoid that traffic. Maybe it involves shooting a missed approach. Maybe it involves breaking off and joining the VFR pattern. It depends on the circumstance, and you should certainly be talking on the common traffic advisory frequency when you do that, because if you're not on the CTAF, nobody in that pattern knows you're coming. This is where it gets a little complicated. When we're shooting an instrument approach, in real life, we're doing that for a reason generally. We are in IMC, instrument meteorological conditions. We can't see visually to navigate, so we're doing that by instruments. That's great. It works tremendously well. It did in the old days when I was doing this with ADFs and VORs and ILSs. It does now when we have GPS. Instrument approaches, instrument flight is very reliable. Here's the challenge though. When we break out of that IMC into VFR conditions, everything changes. That instrument approach is no longer the be-all and end-all of our flight. That was our plan, but if we've broken out into VFR conditions and there's traffic in the pattern, we have to adjust accordingly. If that should happen to you, you're shooting an approach into a non-towered airport. Maybe you're in IMC, maybe you're just simulating IMC. It doesn't really matter. If you break out into VFR conditions, you're now a VFR flight. You might still be on an instrument flight plan, but the FAA says we're all charged to see and avoid when we're in flight. So if all of a sudden we have the ability to see and we see traffic, well, we have a responsibility to avoid that. Just because I'm on an instrument approach doesn't mean that VFR traffic on base leg has to get out of my way. It doesn't even mean the VFR traffic on downwind has to extend their downwind so they're not a problem for me. I'm the one who has to adjust, not them, and there's a reason for that. The FAA is very clear on this point, and I am afraid a staggering number of CFIs haven't read this deeply into the books. When you're on a straight-in approach, whether that's VFR or IFR, you do not have the right-of-way over the VFR traffic in the pattern. That's an FAA thing. That's not my opinion. That's written down. So if you're on that approach and everything's going beautifully, but you see that you've got VFR traffic in the pattern, you have a responsibility to either go missed, which is a completely reasonable thing to do, even on a check ride. Tell the examiner, I've got opposing traffic, I'm going missed, and I'll come back and join the VFR pattern. Great, that's a safe thing to do. That's good PIC decision making backed up by FAA directives. Or if I'm in the correct position, if I'm doing a non-precision approach and I'm not directly lined up with the runway anyway, maybe I just break it off from there. I'm in a good position and I go out and join the VFR pattern, 45 degree to the downwind midfield entry, and just fly like normal. Again, your instructor or your designated examiner should respect that as good PIC decision making based on FAA input. What's not a great idea is just to keep on barreling through on final saying, I'm an instrument flight. I'm doing a simulated instrument approach, so I get to go first. No, you don't. You really don't. And actually doing that violates a couple FARs and does not make you look very professional, whether you're the student or the instructor. Now, I bring all this up because safety of flight should be our primary concern. Being number one, being the most important person in the pattern, insisting that we have right of way when the rules say we don't. Well, that's just being a jerk, and that's being an unsafe jerk. And if you happen to be the CFII giving the instruction, it means you've achieved a level of unprofessionalism by all rights you should be ashamed of. Whether you're the student or you're the CFII or you're the VFR pilot in the pattern wondering what the hell are they doing? There are rules about this sort of thing. We don't want to get in a fight on the radio while we're in flight. We don't want to get in a fight on the ramp, but we do want to communicate clearly with each other. And if there's a problem where you're at a non-towered airport and your instructor is having you just barrel on through VFR traffic, you might want to ask for a new instructor. At the very least, when you get on the ground, go look at AC 90-66 Charlie and point it out to your instructor and say, we're doing this wrong, and I don't want to fail my check ride because you taught me to be a jerk. If you have to, go to the chief instructor and say, I don't think my instructor understands the rules, and here they are, written out by the FAA. I need better instruction than this. If you're a VFR pilot who's been cut off or put in a precarious position because you've got flight training going on with people doing simulated instrument approaches and not giving way to the VFR traffic in the pattern, which have the right of way, it's time for you to go have a discussion with the airport director and see if they can step in and correct this situation. Now, it's important that we don't become obnoxious, we don't fight with each other, we're just trying to be safe in the air, and that's going to happen when we all understand the rules, when we all understand the basic procedures, and we actually comply with them. We can all work together, whether it's a towered field or a non-towered field, daytime, nighttime, home field, or away. We can all fly safely, productively, efficiently, and really get someplace with our hobby or our career if we just respect each other, respect the rules, and keep in mind, I might not be right. Maybe I should go look this up, and I challenge you to go look up what I just said. Check out 91.113B, which talks about right-of-way rules, or AC 90-66 Charlie, which will tell you all this is true about operating instrument or simulated instrument in VFR conditions at a non-towered airport. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you got anything out of this, click the like button. Comment below. Tell me if this has ever happened to you, or if you've got a solution for this maybe I didn't pass along. And of course, subscribe to the channel because it just makes Pat Brown so darn happy. And, you know, he's my buddy. I want to see him smile. Y'all take care. I'll see you next time.